Hi sir, I am Ko Ching Woon from Group 6 and the other two members are Lim Nian Chi and Khao Sao Rong. Now, I would like to talk about the definition of poverty. Poverty can be defined as a household as and is considered as absolutely poor when the household fails to have the sufficient income to meet its minimum housing, food and shelter needs. Next, economic inequality. Economic inequality is unequal distribution of income and opportunity between different groups in society. Besides that, economic inequality is also discrepancy in income earned by the various individuals and concentration of wealth assets in the hands of new privileged group or classes. Next, I will move on to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on global poverty. Globally, the increase in poverty that occurred in year 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic still exists, and the number of poor people caused by COVID-19 in year 2021 will continue to increase until 97 million people. The pandemic will likely trigger the biggest economic recession since World War II, causing a financial loss twice as great as during the 2008 recession. That is a staggering $12 trillion the global economy will lose over year 2020 and 2021. The effects are felt unevenly across societies. While no economy is left untouched, lower and middle income countries are worse affected because they have weak defense against economic shock and tend to depend more on a few sectors such as commodities and tourism. Millions of people have already fallen below the poverty line. In just a few months of COVID-19, extreme poverty went up for the first time in 20 years. As you can see from the second diagram, when the COVID-19 starting to spread, the poverty number has raised compared to the 2019 poverty. The 2020 figures is 144 million people, higher from 621 million to 766 million. The prediction of declining of poverty number was totally affected due to COVID-19. Even though at year 2021, many reports suggested that the poverty number will drop at a significant level due to the recovery stage of COVID-19. However, the poverty at year 2021 only decreased of 40 million people during the recovery. Next slide, please. Next, we will move on to some example. There are some countries it can use to act as an example. The first country that take as an example is Indonesia. COVID-19 pandemic has impacted Indonesia's poverty. One projection puts 1.2 million people in the country would eventually be infected. The economic impact is also expected to be severe. Compared to the baseline projection of 5% economic growth in year 2020, various studies estimate that COVID-19 would reduce Indonesia's economic growth to between 1 and 4%. We also find that under the midterms COVID-19 impact on economic growth, the poverty rate will increase from 9.2% in September 2019 to 9.7% by the end of year 2020. This implies that 1.3 million more people will be pushed into poverty. Under the most severe projection, the poverty rate will continue to increase to 12.4%, implying 8.5 million more people will become poor. The latter means that Indonesia's progress in reducing poverty over the last decade would be wiped out. Next. The further example is India. For India, as the pandemic and the eventual lockdown stressed the economy and livelihoods, around 23 crore Indians have been pushed into poverty during year 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic. The rural poverty rate has increased by 15% and the urban poverty rate has increased by 20%. Because of lockdowns, the number of individuals who lie below the minimum wages threshold in India increased by 230 million. When income fell, poorer households have experienced hard time during pandemic. There are 20% households lost their entire income in April and May in 2020. 10 crore of Indians lost their jobs during lockdown. Hence, COVID-19 has led to a sharp decline in earnings for the majority of workers, resulting in a sudden increase in poverty. Women and younger workers have been disproportionately affected too. For women, only 19% remained employed and 47% suffered a permanent job loss during the lockdown, not returning to work even by the end of the year 2020. For younger workers were much more impacted, experiencing higher job losses of a more permanent nature. Around 33% of workers in the age range between 15 to 24 years failed to recover employment even by December 2020. This number was only 6% in the age range between 25 to 44 years group. That's all for my part, and now I would like to pass it to next presenter, Xiaorong.
So hi, I'm Sharon. Will be continuing to present about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on global inequality. So what is inequality? Inequality is an unfair and unequal situation where some people have more right and better job opportunity than other people. Inequality is in turn linked to social, economic, and political. Social inequality refers to the unequal access to all beneficial things in the society because of their social class, religion, gender, race, age, and nationality. Global inequality is driven by change both of the inequality within country and the inequality between country. The inequality have shows that the world is not an equal place. Inequality around the world can link to many causes, for example, like education, employment status, gender inequality, income level, and medical health care. Next slide. The first impact would be the health inequality in accessing healthcare. The inequality often happens between well people and poor people when accessing healthcare. According to JAMA 2020, the pandemic is shining a spotlight in India vast inequality for healthcare to employment right. Under India healthcare system, everyone should be able to receive either free or higher subsidized care at those public hospitals depending on their income. A hospital in New Delhi, a government-run facility that offers free COVID-19 tests for public. However, there is an inequality in access healthcare through social class in India between rich people and poor people. As the rich people can get their tests done quickly by giving money to the guard in order to skip the line, whereby the poor people have to stand in the hot sun for multiple hours because they do not have the money to give the guard to let them skip the line. Although the private hospital in India generally upholds higher standard of care, but most people cannot afford it. Besides that, medical care is even more unequally distributed in United States, where around 33 million Americans from the most disadvantaged and marginalized group have insufficient or they do not have the healthcare insurance. This concludes that inequality accessing healthcare through social class to extent where in developing and developed countries during the pandemic. Next slide. In addition, gender gap inequality in the workforce is one of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on global inequality. According to the International Labour Organization, ILO 2021, the inequality between women and men in the workforce are unequal during the pandemic. There are only 43.2% of the world working age women will be employed in 2021 compared to 68.6% of working age men. During the pandemic, between 2019 and 2020, women employment decreased by 4.2%, representing a drop of 54 million jobs, while men employment also decreased by 3%, representing a drop of 60 million jobs. According to Fabrizio et al. 2020, women are more likely than men to work in social sectors such as service, industry, hospitality, retail, restaurant, and tourists that require face-to-face interactions. For example, in United States, there are almost 74% of women work in social sector compared to 48% of men in 2019. In developing countries, women are also more likely to be employed in social sector than men. Notwithstanding, an even bigger concern in many of these countries is that women often work in the informal sector more frequently than men, and therefore there are a less job security and social protection as well as lower pay. Next, I'll pass it to Nianqi.
Hi, sir. I'm Nianqi, and now I'm going to talk about the comparison of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on global poverty and equality. First is the impact of COVID-19 on poverty. Based on the figure 1, the top 10 countries where extreme poverty is likely to rise the most. Far and away, the biggest impact is likely to be felt in India. India is a particular case in having a large number of highly vulnerable people only recently escaped from poverty, coupled with a very significant expected fall in the economic growth. India per capita growth rate for 2020 had been revised downward to about 11% this year. One of the deepest reasons in the world, this has sharply altered its poverty trajectory that had been trending downward. India recently gave up its title as the country with the largest number of extreme poor to Nigeria, but will reclaim its title this year, adding 85 million people to its poverty rolls in year 2020. Next slide. Next is impact of COVID-19 on inequality. The impact of inequality had included employment issue occur in the global. Unemployment rate increased by at least 20% of 1/3 of reporting economy. Collectively, the region lost roughly 8% working hours due to COVID-19 pandemic in year 2020. Besides that, as the coronavirus spread around the world and workplace closed, millions of workers lost part of all of their income. Even if still working, many workers had to accept shorter hours and wages cut in different industries such as airline, retail, and accommodation, food service, or the title and garment sector, which are highly feminist sector. In some instances, wages cuts were negotiated in collective agreement between workers and employers. For example, in Argentina, a collective agreement includes a 25% cut in the wages of workers in shutdown sector for 60 days as April 1 in year 2020, with a view to saving jobs. Among workers who still had a paid job in the early April, 35% in the US, 30% in the UK, and 20% in Germany reported lower earnings in March compared to earlier months. The COVID-19 crisis has also diminished share prosperity. It defined as the growth in the income of the poorest 40% of a country population. Average global share prosperity is estimated to stagnate or even contract over year 2019 to year 2021. due to reduced growth in average income. The deceleration in economic activity intensified by the pandemic is likely to hit the poor people especially hard, and this could lead to even low share prosperity indicator in coming years. Next, based on the diagram, you can see the estimate show the difference in the number of people in an income type based on pre-pandemic projection and post-pandemic estimate. The poor life on $2 or less daily, low income on $2 to $10, middle income on $10 to $20, upper middle income on $20 to $50, and high income on more than $50. Figure expressed in year 2011. Okay, purchasing power parities in 2011 price, the estimate shows the difference in the number of people in an income tier based on pre-pandemic projection and post-pandemic estimate. The term post-pandemic refers to the period since the onset of pandemic in January 2020. It is assumed that is no change in the income distribution in a region from the benchmark year for the projection to year 2020. Next slide. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic is estimated to push an additional 88 million to 150 million people into extreme poverty this year, with the total rising to as many as 150 billion by year 2021, depending on the severity of the economic contraction. Extreme poverty defines as living on less than $1.9 a day, is likely to affect between 9.1% and 9.4% of the world population in year 2020. According to the Millennial Poverty and Share Prosperity Report, this would represent a regression to the rate of 9.2% in year 2017. Had the pandemic not consumed the globe, the poverty rate was expected to drop to 7.9% in year 2020. Besides that, this report also finds that many of the new poor will be in countries that already have high poverty rates. A number of middle-income countries will see the significant number of people sleep below the extreme poverty line. About 82% of the total will be in middle-income countries, the report estimates. That's all my presentation. And next slide will be our reference list. Thank you.